And let's be real, history class can sometimes feel like it's full of these untouchable figures, right? Like the founding fathers. They're practically American royalty. Except, the kind that rebelled against actual royalty. But here's the thing. They weren't superheroes. They were just people, flawed and complex, trying to build a country in between writing strongly worded letters and, apparently, some pretty messed up stuff. So, buckle up, because today we're diving into the side of the founding fathers they probably wouldn't want on a monument, with 10 disturbing facts that might just change how you see these guys. And, spoiler alert, it involves some questionable medical practices, hidden bones, and a whole lot of basement drama. Okay, so everyone knows George Washington, right? First president, general, face on the dollar bill, couldn't tell a lie about chopping down a cherry tree. You know the drill. But even good old George had a dark side. Washington was a slave owner and benefited from it for decades. When Pennsylvania passed a law that could free his slaves, Washington got crafty. The law said any enslaved person living in Pennsylvania for over 6 months could petition for freedom. Washington exploited loopholes.
Every 6 months, he'd ship his slaves out of state, resetting their residency. They never lived in Pennsylvania long enough to qualify for freedom. It was a calculated move that kept people enslaved.
A stark reminder that the fight for equality and justice in America is ongoing. Okay, so picture this. It's 1793 and yellow fever is ravaging Philadelphia. People are dying left and right, panic is in the air, and medical knowledge is, shall we say, a bit less advanced than it is today. Enter Benjamin Rush, founding father, signer of the Declaration of Independence, and firm believer in bloodletting as a cure for pretty much everything. Yeah, you heard that right. Bloodletting, as in draining people's blood to cure them.
Now, to be fair to Dr. Rush, this was a popular medical practice at the time. But even back then, some people were like, are we sure about this whole bloodletting thing?
But Rush was convinced it was the answer. He was so convinced, in fact, that he went full-on bloodletting evangelist during the yellow fever epidemic. We're talking draining pints of blood from patients who were already weak and vulnerable. And spoiler alert, it didn't work. In fact, it probably made things worse. Now, some historians argue that Rush's heart was in the right place, that he genuinely believed he was helping people. But his story serves as a stark reminder of the importance of critical thinking, even, and maybe especially, when it comes to respected authority figures. So we've all heard about George Washington and the whole refusing to be king thing, right? Well, his successor, John Adams? Not so much. See, Adams, brilliant lawyer and all-around founding father though he was, had a bit of a complex. He'd spent years fighting for independence from the British monarchy, but deep down, he kinda missed the whole pomp and circumstance of it all.
While serving as vice president under Washington, Adams insisted that everyone refer to the president as His Majesty.
And it gets better, or worse depending on your perspective. He even proposed an even longer, more elaborate title, His Highness, the President of the United States of America and protector of the rights of the same. Needless to say, his ideas didn't exactly go over well. In fact, they probably contributed to his losing the presidency after just one term. Chapter 4. Wife in the Basement.
Alright folks, buckle up for this one, because it's a doozy. We're talking about me, Patrick Henry, the guy who famously declared, "Give me liberty or give me death." Passionate words, right? But when it came to my wife, Sarah, my actions were a little less liberating.
See, Sarah Henry suffered from what historians now believe was postpartum depression, a condition that was tragically misunderstood at the time. After the birth of their 6th child, Sarah's mental health deteriorated, and Patrick, well, he didn't exactly handle it with grace.
Instead of seeking help or understanding, I did what many men of my time did with things they didn't understand. I locked it away. And by it, I mean my wife, in the basement.
It's a chilling reminder of how far we've come in our understanding and treatment of mental illness. And it's a sobering example of how even the most passionate advocates for freedom can fail to extend that same compassion and understanding to those closest to them. Chapter 5. A Poisoned Patriot. Get ready for a tale of betrayal, poison, and the limits of justice in colonial America. This one involves George Wythe, a signer of the Declaration of Independence and a renowned legal scholar. Wythe was known for his sharp mind and his commitment to education. He even tutored a young Thomas Jefferson, so you know he was the real deal. But even brilliant legal minds aren't immune to family drama. In Wythe's case, that drama came in the form of his grandnephew, who, let's just say, wasn't exactly winning any Grandnephew of the Year awards. This guy, driven by greed and a sense of entitlement, decided that the best way to secure his inheritance was to, well, eliminate the competition. Chapter 6. Ben's Bones. All right, folks, time to talk about Ben Franklin. You know, the kite-flying, stove-inventing, founding father with a penchant for witty sayings? Well, turns out old Ben had a bit of a hobby. A secret one. Fast forward to 1998. Workers are renovating Ben Franklin's former home in London, hoping to preserve it as a historical landmark. They're expecting to find, you know, old furniture, maybe some letters, that sort of thing. What they weren't expecting to find? Over 1,200 human bones. Yeah, you heard that right. Bones. Lots of them. Hidden beneath the floorboards, stuffed in the walls, basically everywhere you wouldn't want to find a pile of human remains. Naturally, people freaked out. Was Ben Franklin secretly a serial killer? Did he have some kind of bone fetish? Well, the truth, as it often does, turned out to be a bit less sensational, but no less fascinating. See, back in the 18th century, studying anatomy was a bit of a taboo subject. Dissecting cadavers was frowned upon, and medical schools had a hard time getting their hands on, well, bodies. Enter Ben Franklin, ever the man of science and progress. Chapter 7. Tortured for Freedom. Now, signing the Declaration of Independence. Pretty gutsy move, right? These guys were basically committing treason against the most powerful empire in the world. And while they all knew the risks, no one felt the wrath of the British quite like Richard Stockton of New Jersey. See, Stockton wasn't just some guy with a quill and a dream. He was a prominent lawyer, a judge, a man of influence. And the British? They don't take too kindly to influential folks rebelling against the crown. So when the Redcoats came marching through New Jersey, they made a beeline for Stockton's estate. They ransacked his home, destroyed his prized library, a devastating loss for a man of letters, and captured Stockton himself. Now you might think, okay, they captured him. Prisoner of war, right? Wrong. Stockton was thrown into Provost Prison in New York, a hellhole even by 18th century standards. We're talking starvation, freezing temperatures, beatings, the works. They even denied him medical treatment, hoping to break his spirit and make an example of him. Years of this brutal treatment took their toll. Stockton, once a robust man, was reduced to a frail shell of his former self. Chapter 8. No Rest for the Dead. Let's talk about Thomas Paine, the guy who wrote Common Sense. Yeah, that guy. Paine's journey to the afterlife was as bumpy as his life.
I wasn't Mr. Popularity by the time I died in 1809, buried in an unmarked grave with few attendees.
10 years later, William Cobbett dug up Paine's bones. He set sail to give him a proper burial. But Cobbett never made it back. And Paine's bones? They disappeared. To this day, no one knows where all of Paine's remains are. Chapter 9. The Homeless Founding Father. Now, not all founding fathers were wealthy lawyers or influential politicians. Take John Hart, for example. Known as Honest John, Hart was a simple farmer from New Jersey, a family man who believed in the cause of liberty. He was also the oldest signer of the Declaration of Independence, a testament to the fact that you're never too old to fight for what you believe in. But Hart's patriotism came at a steep price. Shortly after signing the Declaration, tragedy struck. His wife of 36 years passed away, leaving Hart heartbroken and alone to care for their 13 children. As if that wasn't enough, the British Army decided to pay a little visit to New Jersey. They descended upon Hart's farm, destroying his crops, slaughtering his livestock, and ransacking his home. They even targeted Hart personally, forcing the elderly man to flee into the nearby woods for safety. Imagine that. A 65-year-old, grieving the loss of his wife, forced to abandon his home and live as a fugitive in the wilderness. What a way to go. Few founding fathers passed into the next life as awfully as New York Senator Gouverneur Morris. He was one of the most legendary figures of his time, but is largely forgotten today. Morris wasn't necessarily renowned for his oratory or political skills, but was remembered for the wild predicaments he often found himself in. In addition to drafting the first version of the preamble to the Constitution, Morris was a notorious womanizer, having affairs with many elite women in both the United States and Europe. He famously walked on a peg leg, with rumors suggesting he had lost his leg after jumping out of a married woman's bedroom window to escape her husband. Although that story was untrue, It cemented Morris's reputation as a wild character. In the end, his wild days caught up with him in the worst way. In 1816, at just 64 years old, Morris died after attempting to cure a urinary tract blockage at home using some, tools he had lying around. That's right, he performed his own surgery on his penis and failed. We can't really imagine a more painful or embarrassing way to go. How come we never read about that in the history books? So yeah, turns out the founding fathers, those guys on the money and in the history books, weren't exactly squeaky clean. They were complicated, flawed, and occasionally downright disturbing, just like all of us. But that's kind of the point, isn't it? History isn't a fairy tale. It's messy, unpredictable, and full of people who, despite their best intentions, sometimes made really questionable choices. But by confronting those uncomfortable truths, by acknowledging the good and the bad, we gain a deeper, more nuanced understanding of our past. And maybe, just maybe, we can learn from their mistakes and strive to build a better future. One where we extend liberty and justice for all, not just for some. That's all for today, my friends. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time with more amazing topics. Till then, peace.